Stephanie Anderson, and I am the Everyday Learners Director for United Way of Utah County. And if this is the first time you're joining us, we are doing this because we are not able to do our live face-to-face Ready to Learn sessions as we have in the past. In fact, I think this is our 15th week of doing this from Facebook Live, and we are really excited to join you. If this is your first time, you're going to be able to see a PDF file that you can download and follow along with our PowerPoint, and then save that PowerPoint for later use. I think that's exciting. Some of the things that my staff has created to help you as you watch these videos. And we are really excited that we were able to have Michael Ann Bradley last week with our Everyday Strong presentation, and we really appreciate the comments that you made, and we are glad that you enjoyed that and you were able to learn from that. At United Way, we do have 3 different platforms that we are helping to make sure that you have the resources that are necessary to help you in your life. And those are in education and in Everyday Strong, which is mental health. And then our everyday support is what we've talked a lot about, is when you need support such as food or housing, or you have a situation with heat or utilities or any type of question like that, you can call 211 to help you with that support. We've been really fortunate to have 211 in our state because of the fires and of COVID and all the different situations that we have will help people know about what's going on or where they can turn for resources. So it is a great way for you to get the help you need. One of the helps that we provide is our VITA program. It's our volunteer income tax assistance, and we are in July almost, and taxes are due on July 15th. And so if you haven't gotten your taxes done and you make under $56,000 a year, you can call 211 and ask for the VITA program, and they can help you. They are doing some drop-offs at the main building, United Way building, if you don't have the capability of sending your things in through the electronically. So there's lots of different ways that you can get help through that program to make sure that your taxes are filed. You do not have to pay for someone to prepare your taxes, and that will be done for you by someone that is trained and certified to do taxes. So we hope that you use that. So some of the things that we have found doing these every week, instead of having the same talk but for a month, we've been doing a new topic every week. And we, in the past, have had 13 topics that we've been able to present to you. Well, we're on our 15th week, and we ran out of different workshops that we have been able to present face-to-face. And so we've been able to come up with some ideas, and one of them would be our STEM or STEAM ideas. And so for the next 3 weeks, we are going to be presenting on science, technology, engineering, and math, and we're going to talk about what STEAM is today, and we're going to talk about some book ideas that you can do. We're going to have videos and some activities that you can do at home with your children that will support that. And so I am going to start out with the book called Dr. DeSoto, and this is, if you've ever read any of his books, he always has a problem, and he's always able to solve them. So let's see what happens today. Dr. DeSoto. Dr. DeSoto, the dentist, did a very good work. So he had no end of patients. Those close to his own size, moles, chipmunks, etc., sat in the regular dentist chair. Larger animals sat on the floor while Dr. DeSoto stood on a ladder. For extra large animals, he had a special room. There, Dr. DeSoto was hosted up to the patient's mouth by his assistant, who also happened to be his wife. Look what they're using there. They're using a pulley. Dr. DeSoto was especially popular with the big animals. He was able able to work inside their mouths wearing rubbers to keep his feet dry, and his fingers were so delicate and his drill so dainty that they could hardly feel any pain. Being a mouse, he refused to treat animals dangerous to mice, and it said so on his sign. When the doorbell rang, he and his wife would look out the window. They wouldn't admit even the most timid-looking cat. Cats and other dangerous animals not accepted for treatment. One day, when they looked out, they saw a well-dressed fox with a flannel bandage around his jaw. "I cannot treat you," Dr. DeSoto shouted. "Sir, haven't you read my sign?" "Oh, please," the fox wailed. "Have mercy, I am suffering." And he wept so bitterly it was pitiful to see. "Just a moment," said Dr. DeSoto. "That poor fox," he whispered to his wife. "What shall we do?" "Let's risk it," said Mrs. DeSoto. She pressed the buzzer and let the fox in. He was up the stairs in a flash. "Bless your little hearts," he cried, falling to his knees. "I beg you, do something. My tooth is killing me." "Sit on the floor," said Dr. DeSoto, and remove the bandage, please. Dr. DeSoto climbed up the ladder and bravely entered the fox's mouth. "Oh," he gasped. The fox had a written bicuspid and an unusually bad breath. "This tooth will have to come out," Dr. DeSoto announced, "but we can make you a new one." "Just stop the pain," whimpered the fox, wiping some tears away. Despite his misery, he realized he had a tasty little morsel in his mouth, and his jaw began to quiver. "Keep open," yelled Dr. DeSoto. "Wide open," yelled his wife. "I'm giving you gas now," said Dr. DeSoto. "You won't feel a thing when I yank the tooth." Soon the fox was in dreamland. Yummy," he mumbled. "How I love them raw, with just a pinch of salt and a dry white wine." They could guess what he was dreaming about. Mrs. DeSoto handed her husband a pole to keep the fox's mouth open. Dr. DeSoto fastened his extractor to the bad tooth. Then he and his wife began turning the winch. Finally, with a sucking sound, the tooth popped out and hung swaying in the air. "I'm bleeding," the fox yelped when he came to. Dr. DeSoto ran up the ladder and stuffed some gauze in the hole. "The worst is over," he said. "I'll have your new tooth ready tomorrow. Be here at 11 sharp." The fox, still woozy, said goodbye and left. On his way home, he wondered if it would be shabby of him to eat Dr. DeSoto when the job was done. After office hours, Mrs. DeSoto molded a tooth out of pure gold and polished it. "Raw with salt and deep," muttered Dr. DeSoto. "How foolish to trust a fox." "He didn't even know what he was saying," said Mrs. DeSoto. "Why should he harm us while helping him?" "Because he's a fox," said the doctor. "They're wicked, wicked creatures." That night, the DeSotos lay awake worrying. "Should we let him in tomorrow?" Mrs. DeSoto wondered. "Once I start a job," said the dentist firmly, "I finish it. My father was the same way." "But we must do something to protect ourselves," said his wife. They talked and talked and talked until they formed a plan. "I think it will work," said Dr. DeSoto. A minute later, he was snoring. The next morning, promptly at 11, a very cheerful fox turned up. He was feeling not a particle of pain. When Dr. DeSoto got into his mouth, he snapped it shut for a moment, then wide open and laughed. "Just a joke," he chortled. "Be serious," said the dentist sharply. "We have work to do." His wife was lugging the heavy tooth up the ladder. "Oh, I love it," exclaimed the fox. "It's beautiful." Dr. DeSoto set the gold tooth in the socket and hooked it up to the teeth on both sides. The fox caressed the new tooth with his tongue. "My, it feels good," he thought. "I really shouldn't eat them. On the other hand, how can I resist?" "We are not finished," said Dr. DeSoto, holding up a large jug. "I have a remarkable preparation developed only recently by my wife and me. With just one application, you could be rid of toothaches forever. How would you like to be the first one to receive this unique treatment?" "I certainly would," the fox declared. "I'd be honored." He hated any kind of personal pain. "You will never have to see us again," said Dr. DeSoto. "No one will ever see you again," said the fox to himself. He had definitely made up his mind to eat them, with the help of his brand new tooth. Dr. DeSoto stepped into the fox's mouth with a bucket of secret formula and proceeded to paint each tooth. He hummed as he worked. Mrs. DeSoto stood by the ladder, pointing out spots he had missed. The fox looked very happy. When the dentist was done, he stepped out. "Now close your jaws tight," he said, "and keep them closed for a full minute." The fox did what he was told. Then he tried to open his mouth, but his teeth were stuck together. Excuse me, I should have mentioned," said Dr. DeSoto. "You won't be able to open your mouth for a day or two. The secret formula must first permeate the dentines. Not to worry, no pain ever again." The fox was stunned. He stared at Dr. DeSoto, then at his wife. They smiled and waited. All he could say was, "Thank you very much," he said through his clenched teeth, and then get up to leave. He tried to do so with dignity. Then he scrambled down the stairs in a daze. Dr. DeSoto and his assistant had outfoxed the fox. They kissed each other and took the rest of the day off. So as we talk about STEM and STEAM, one of the things that we're going to always reflect back on is that when we're working with any type of science topic, we're going to be always trying to solve a problem or find out how to do something differently. And so this is a great book to introduce some of the things that we're going to talk about. So the first thing is that we need to just say, why is it important for a young parent to teach their children different science topics? And I love this quote from, it is a website or a blog that's from steampoweredfamily.com. And in it, the creator of it says, "From preschool to elementary to middle school and finally high school, STEM and STEAM education will help children become innovative adults with exceptional critical thinking and problem-solving skills." And so when we look at what STEM and STEAM is, it is to help children be able to problem solve and to think. And so a lot of schools, and your school might be included, is not only is STEM and STEAM going to be in just its own subject, that they'll actually incorporate it into all types of subjects for children to learn. So let's define what is STEM. STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and math. However, teaching STEM is not just sticking those titles together and making sure that we cover a subject in math or in science, or in technology, but when used correctly, it looks like real life learning. So as you can see a picture of a child with a magnifying glass, they're doing what's real to them, and they are experimenting and problem solving, and there is a lot of STEM activities in there in everyday experiences. I was just telling one of my staff members that I've been weeding in my garden. It seems like the weeds grow faster than the flowers, and my grandson saw a snail, and we were looking at its antennas, and we were watching it as it climbed up the fence, those slimy things that climb up the fence. And he said to me, "Grandma, is a snail like a crab? Does it lose its shell and get another one?" And I didn't know. And so that was part of let's find out type of thing. And so everyday kind of experiences, whether you're outside or inside, can add to these type of things. So what is STEAM? STEAM stands for the same thing with just one added activity: science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And so a lot of people think, how are the arts included in all of these science different topics? and I really like how they've described it, is that because when we add the A, the arts support problem solving, discovery, exploring, curiosity, and so much more. And so when children do art projects, like mixing colors, they're doing basically scientific experiments. And so here's a couple examples of that. This is by Leonardo da Vinci, and he said, the human foot is a masterpiece of engineering and a work of art. And we all know, those of people that have studied Da Vinci, is that he was fascinated with the human body. And this is actually an image from one of his notebooks that he made, is the human anatomy and how it all connects together. And so that's one thing that he studied to help him in his sculpture and his artwork. And so those type of drawings became something like this. Isn't that beautiful? The art of his studying human anatomy, or what he called engineering, actually became something that we can visually appreciate. Also, in the musical field, when we studied classical music, we know Vivaldi, and I just mispronounced that. I'm sorry. My humanity teachers would have been very disappointed. He observed the 4 seasons and was able to see those seasons in music. And I just think that is amazing, to think that by looking at that, he was able to create classical music that represented each different season. And he used different instruments to help you hear that season. And so as you listen to that with your kids, see if you can pick out what it is and what instrument it is. So we can see just by these few examples, these 2 examples, how art can help us in the science field. So as we move on, this is the National Research Council said that by cultivating this sense of wonder, adults can help children become scientific thinkers. As they learn about the world around them, including weather, light, living things and matter and motion, young children begin to see patterns and understand the process that affects their personal environment. As we've talked about in other workshops, and as we've done the book reading, children understand learning best when it is about their environment, how it works to help them. And I think that that's one thing that as you look at, even though there's great shows out there like Nova that talks about planets far away, very young children want to know about their environment and how science, engineering, math, how it affects them, how making cookies or making bread, how that affects their environment. So look at that with a very young child, is making sure that they understand it through their own learning. And so one of the things that we want to talk about, and you can pull this up, is that every state, including ours, has early learning standards. And we are very, very fortunate because the state of Utah is just completing the new early learning standards. Now, when you look for it, you'll still see the ones that were, I think that they were written in about 2016. But next year, you'll be able to see the new learning standards. And they are going to be consistent through every state. But what's really nice is if you go to your computer and you pull up the Utah Early Learning Standards, they're going to tell you what they are, and then they're going to give you ideas and activities to do with your child for each one. And the one thing that is going to be difficult for you is not maybe to get ahead of yourself. Remember, children are just starting out. And so some of these things sound so simple that you might be like, well, they already know this, but they might not. So start simple, and as you go on, as your children enter school, You can go on to see what the standards are in all of these, and once again, you can find activities to support your child. And PBS, who helps support this program, has so many activities and shows that really help with STEAM. So as we go through these standards, we're actually going to focus on one today. But the first standard is weather. And weather is a combination of sunlight, wind, snow, or rain, and temperature in a particular place at a particular time. Humans can plan and prepare for different weather conditions. And so just by looking out the window, I don't know about you guys yesterday, because it is the end of June, but when I went to get dressed, I looked out the window and saw that it was rainy and overcast, and I wanted a sweater. And so that's a simple activity that you can do. What should we do to prepare? How do we solve a problem of how we should dress? How should we dress when it's sunny? How should we dress when it is windy? So those are the kind of the activities you can do in that area. Light is its own learning area. Sunlight has an effect on surfaces. Objects can be seen when light is available to illuminate them. Light is required for plants to grow. So there's a lot of ways that you can help children understand light, just in living things and in plants, and when it's dark and when it's light. And I've heard my grandkids say a lot, it's light, I can get up now, or it's not dark, I don't have to go to sleep. They know how to predict when it's sleep time and when it's not. So they're already good problem solvers. Living things is another standard, and that includes plants, animals, including human beings, and it depends on their surroundings and what they need, including food and water and shelter. And it's going to talk about the behaviors and between parents and offsprings so that they can survive. So in this one, we can talk about children and families and what a family of elephant needs, and compare it to what a family of human needs. So our last one, and this is the one that we're going to talk about today, is called matter and motion. And things are all made up of matter. Think back to what you learned in your science classes, and there's all kinds of matter, such as wood and metal and water, that have different properties. And they can be observed, described, and classified. And then pushing, do any of you ever have pushing at your house? Or pulling? You are now entering the scientific world of an object, can change the speed or direction of an object in motion. So those are our learning standards that we're going to be talking about in the next couple weeks. We have a math workshop that we focused on, and just in that workshop we talk about that a lot of times children might not understand math because they don't know the lingo or the language. And that's the same for STEAM or STEM projects, is that we can start very early to start using this language in our home so children can understand it. So some of those are collide and collision, compare, explain, figure out, investigate, make sense of data. Now that's one I want to hear your kids say. Observe, plan, predict, test, and share information. I love this graphic that our Maddie put in for this particular slide, because we know that children are considered little scientists. In fact, by the time they're 18 years old, they are very interested in cause and effect. What makes this toilet flush? What will go down? What will make it not go, the water go down? How does this light work? So cause and effect is something that children start out with. The other day, my son was over, and he said of his 3-year-old daughter, the first question out of her mouth all day long is why? And that's very normal for a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old would be what? And so being able to describe different words, why do I have to sit in my car seat? Why do I have to wait till you stop the car? Why do I have to? And asking that questions over and over again, they are hard to answer. Remember, we talked about in another workshop that I think that children ask 9 questions an hour, and that helps them understand their world and what it's all about. And so knowing these different vocabulary words and starting to use them will help them as they go to school or as they start studying different things. I'm not going to read all of this book, but we've been very fortunate with Scholastic that they have so many books right now about STEM. And another thing that they really have a lot of books about are women who have made a difference in our different STEAM and STEM fields. And so this one's called Cece Loves Science. And another thing about the books that they've written is they try to make them, or they have made them, very diverse in the characters. So this is about Cece Loves Science. Cece loved to ask questions. Her mother said her first word was why. Her father said it was how. But her favorite question was, what if? You would make a great scientist, Cece, said her teacher, Mrs. Curie, because science is all about asking questions. Do fish ever get thirsty? Cece wanted to know. They do, said Mrs. Curie. Do hummingbirds really hum? Their sound comes from their wings, said Mrs. Curie. What if we all jumped up at the same time? Would the earth move? Good question, said Mrs. Curie. I think we should investigate. And so this book goes along and talks about different scientists and the study of what they study. And then Cece gets to ask a question, and she gets to predict, and she gets to observe. And so, and then in the back of the book, it talks about different other science facts and science words. And so as we're sending these books out, these are great books to help you find the words in there and then find other words as we do. So for those of you with young kids, even 18 months to 2, you can teach STEM and you can teach STEAM because children are naturally born of wanting to know why and how and what if. And so use that to your advantage of what if we mix these colors together? Or what if we put cornstarch in water? What happens? And you can ask those questions by saying, let's observe what happens. What are you going to predict will happen when we put cornstarch with water? And you can let them know predict means what do you think will happen? And all of a sudden those words will become very a part of their vocabulary at a very young age. So 2 of the words that we will want to start with with your child is observing and predicting. So we're going to watch a video and have your child observe the weather. This was found on PBS's website. You can go to PBS Parents or PBS Teachers. You will have to create an account. It's free. But this will give you can just put in the word observation or predict. And that's what I did, and this is what I came up with. So we're going to observe the weather. Now you can ask your child to predict a lot of different things, but one of the questions that I came up with was, what will happen to the rain, the hail, and the snow once it falls to the ground? And remember, our key word today is predict. So that's an easy one to remember, is that we are going to ask our children, what can they predict? And when you're filling out the Google form that you need to fill out by Friday at 3, the key word is predict. So what can you predict what will happen? And most of the kids will think about it. Maybe they'll say, oh, rain will make puddles, or it will help us have rivers. Or the hail, maybe if they've experienced hail, is it will dent things. With the snow, I'm so glad it's not snowing right now, but we can predict that maybe some cars will slide off the road. But we will predict that eventually that will evaporate or dry up and it won't be there anymore. And so those are some things that you can ask your child when it is raining again, or when it's snowing. You can ask them what their predictions will be. How long is the snow going to last? How many months are we going to experiencing that? But you can say what if or predict and start doing that. Once again, very simple. I'm sure a lot of you are already doing these type of things, and it will really help them as they start problem solving or asking questions on their own. So today we're going to focus on matter and motion, and we're going to really talk about the motion and what that is. Now there's several programs that PBS offers that have STEM-based programming. Curious George has been around for a long, long time, and PBS. It is one that Curious George sometimes gets in trouble because of his curiosity, but it also is a show that shows us what happens and the problems that he faces and how he gets out of those problems, or it can tell us about different science fields. So in this one, we're going to be talking about the wind or the motion of our breath. So here is Curious George, a fan. Oops.
You can click on the picture.
Hello.
Betsy made pretty good bubbles, but she was no plastic frog.
Hey, George. We're watching dogs to make money. Want to help?
Yeah, George, why don't you help? There's soap and water and bubbles and soap.
Great. George can help me make bubbles to attract dirty customers.
George figured the triangle bubble maker was broken. But a square bubble would be just as good.
They fooled me the first time I tried them too. It doesn't matter what shape bubble maker you use, they'll always turn out round.
All this bubble making made George miss Springy even more.
You know, until I watched that little clip, I never thought about if you had a different size, shaped the bubble maker, would it make that shape? But I'm sure children would think that, because in my mind, I just knew that a bubble would always be round. So what a fun idea to have your kids see that a bubble is always round. Now, what does this have to do with motion? Our motion of our breath made those bubbles, or in this instance, the motion of the fan, which is like our breath, made those bubbles appear. And so one of the activities you can do with your children is see if they can make those bubbles. And we're going to talk about another activity that you can do. We will send you this little handout that will go along with this activity. But what you can do with your child is you can either do this with your breath or with a fan, A blow dryer works. I've used a blow dryer when we've taught this in a preschool. But make sure that you do it on the cool setting and not the hot setting. And usually the low setting is better than the high setting. But you can do all types of things and observe what happens. But what you can do is, oops.
George, would you help me? Did you watch Sharky's ball?
Pressing the wrong button. So, how many breaths from start to finish? So you're going to want to pick 3 different objects, and you can pick them or your child can pick them. And then you're going to draw a picture of it, or you can put an image in there, or let your child write on there if they're old enough. And then you're going to guess or predict how many breaths will it take for you to get across from start to finish. So you're going to have to make your start line and your finish line. And find your things. Parents, if you're doing it with a really young child, you might find something like a feather or a straw, something that will move a little bit easier, something that's going to take a little bit to move, and then something that's not going to move at all. And I love to do the story of the 3 little pigs in here, that what got blown down by the big bad wolf. It's a really great story to put in here. But then you're going to see how many breaths did it take. And this is a great activity for your child to see that their motion can make something move and predict what is going to happen. And then they can play with different things. Another activity that you can do with bubble is bubble art for the A in the STEAM. And one of the things that I think is interesting is you can make your own bubbles. Again, we'll send you a recipe for making your own bubbles. It's very easy. And then you can just add some different color on there and then blow it on the paper. Now, you can see that this child is really close. And what does it do with the bubbles once they pop when you're close to the paper? Or what if you're far away and you blow just one bubble and it pops? What happens? Is it going to create big dots or little dots? What happens when you have dark colors or light colors when it dries? So those are some of the things that you can experiment with. And as you're going along, we've got one book, and we've read this in our storytelling, but it is one of my favorite books to read to young children. It is a Sesame Street beginning book, and it's got some parent tips on the back. But bubbles are a great way for imagination and to investigate and predict what's going to happen. Bubbles, bubbles on my nose. Bubbles, bubbles on my toes. Bubbles, bubbles. I thought I missed a page. Float on top. Bubbles, bubbles. Pop, pop, pop. Bubbles, bubbles fly so high. Count 1, 2, 3 as they go by. Bubbles, bubbles, so much fun. Bubbles, bubbles for everyone. So one thing kids really like to do is they like to try to catch a bubble. And so here's just a fun clip of Elmo trying to decide what is the best way to catch a bubble. So before you watch this clip or watch it with your kids later on, you can ask them, how can we catch a bubble? What's the best way? And you can, once again, predict and decide what is the best way to catch a bubble.
You know what? Elmo loves bubbles. Who doesn't? Elmo loves blowing bubbles and then trying to catch them.
Yeah, and then trying not to pop them.
Elmo wonders, what's the best way to catch a bubble so it won't pop?
I wonder how we could find out.
Yeah.
You could do an experiment.
Yeah!
again, I would really encourage you, as you're looking for ideas to do, is to go to pbs.org and just in the parent or the teacher source, write STEM. What I did was I knew what I wanted to focus on motion, and so I just put in there force and motion. One of the things you'll find is it's going to have the learning standard and how those learning standards are being met by this particular thing. And isn't it exciting to know that you're accomplishing the goals to help your child get ready for school? One of the books that I really like is Harold and the Purple Crayon. And we've used this in our imagination topic about how Harold uses his imagination. Well, in part of the book, he has a lot of motion that's going on. He's sailing, and then he actually comes up a mountain and climbs all the way to the top so he can try to find his bedroom window. And he gets to the top, and he looked over and down the other side, and he slips. And there wasn't anything on the other side of the mountain, and he was falling into thin air. But luckily, he kept his wits and his purple crayon, and he made a balloon, and he grabbed on. And he made a basket under the big balloon, enough to stand in. And he had a fine view from the balloon, but he still couldn't see his window, and he couldn't even see his house. And so in this one, we talk about motion by Harold is the one that's falling. And that's what's fun about being able to understand about motion is motion starts with a child's own body. They're the ones that can create the motion. And when they collide with a ball or they collide with each other, those are things that children can learn in their own world. And so even just using a book like this and talking, or when we were reading Dr. DeSoto, and he used the pulley to work his way up, those are all kinds of motions that we do. One of the best types of motion for young children is to get your wrapping paper, cardboard tube, or a paper towel tube, and see the motion of the tube, and when you put a little car or when you put a ball down there, and then once again you can predict what's going to happen. Remember, that's the key word today. But you can start seeing things, and if the row is just flat, will that work? Or if it gets up on an angle, what will happen? So there's lots of things that you can do to create force and motion. A couple other things that you can find out is just remember your child is his own source of force and motion. Once again, we're going to use Elmo as he uses his own body.
Let's discover something about force and motion.
Hey, Elmo, why are you dancing? Oh, it's just for fun, Abby. Elmo loves to dance. But we're supposed to be finding out about force and motion.
Actually, Elmo is showing an example of motion right now.
Oh, so motion has to do with moving.
That is correct.
Hey, Abby, let's do for fun.
And that is an example of force. Force is the push or pull that makes something move.
Oh, like when we do the bump and we move each other a little.
Exactly.
Oh boy! Now I want to find out more about force and motion. Yeah, I know too. Let's investigate. Oh, and you two use your investigator spy glasses. Yeah.
Choose one of the games or videos below.
one of two words that you should have heard in there about force and motion is push and pull. And those are two words that we want children between the ages of 2 and 5 to know and understand. That when you push something or pull it, what's going to happen. And so there's some other words that you can use as you're investigating, as you're observing, as you're predicting of how much push do you need and what's too much. One of my favorite shows that you can go on to PBS's is Sid the Science Kid. And he has a lot of shows with the motion. In fact, he uses different materials to see how things will move. How his socks makes him move versus his tennis shoes. And so those are things that you can do. Once again, very simple. It's in your child's own world that they can understand. And then as they get older, they can start taking those same topics that they've understood in their own world and understanding the world around them. And so that's what we want to start with. So I'm going to show you one more idea. In fact, the Cat in the Hat, he knows a lot. And a lot of times they will do scientific experiments and about science in there. And so this is one more way to use the motion. So how many of you have done things like that? Can you see how using just everyday learning experience is going to help your child? And you can incorporate that in the car or as your child is outside playing or even in the home. And so the next couple weeks we're going to take another one of the learning standards and we're going to just focus a little bit about that and give you some ideas, give you some books that you can read. Some of the books that we picked today is another Robert Munsch book. This one's called The Sandcastle Contest, and it's the problem about having to build the best sandcastle ever and how they did it. This book, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, the movie never came as close as how great the book is. So I hope that you get the book or check it out from the library. But this is a problem that started with motion at the very beginning. This is one of my children's favorite books. It's it's been around for a long time. But the motion is Grandpa flipping pancakes and one lands on someone's head. And it reminds Grandpa of a story that he tells about the town of Choose and Swallow. And there's a lot of movement in this book, but everything rains or storms the food, and that's how they eat. Really great pictures, really fun ideas of how the people in the town of Choose and Swallow solved their problem of spaghetti filling up their town and their beaches becoming filled with bread and then a pancake, and lots of fun of how they did it. I love the illustrations in here as they used great imagination to solve their problems. So a lot of fun. Your child is probably moving right now, and so we'll let you get back to him studying science or STEM or STEAM. But don't forget that art is a great way for children to learn those different technology and math and things like that. So we're excited that you came today. Remember, you have until Friday to fill out the form at 3 o'clock, and we'll send you one of our problem-solving books. The word today is predict. We will be back on Thursday for storytelling, talking, and we're just going to sort of wrap up. I don't know that you can ever wrap up having too many diverse books in your home, but we're just going to finish up about diversity and finding diverse books that you can use in your home to help children see outside their window and to see themselves, but to see other people. Thanks for joining us.